Now, last week on the Sound Off, as I was in the middle of recording, I got the breaking news that Sabu had passed away. And so I talked a little bit about his life and his career for a few minutes and just what an influence he was. You know, when you think of people who were influential in their field and innovators, Sabu definitely fits the bill where that is concerned. And it came out of nowhere because he had just had his, what was billed anyway as his retirement match at the GCW show last month. And then a few weeks later, bam, he's gone. And it was just very weird. But we have some more information this week on the death of Sabu. A GoFundMe was set up to assist his family with funeral and other expenses with a $25,000 goal. Last I checked this morning, it was over $50,000 raised and counting. And when I talked about him last week, again, I was getting things in real time. So I was more just kind of giving my general thoughts on him and his career. We still don't have a cause of death. And Rob Van Dam dropped some information on why that is. RVD did a live stream with Taz on Thursday night talking about Sabu and just telling old stories. I watched most of it. It was a very informative stream just to hear from two people who obviously work with Sabu and knew him very well. And Rob led off with some corrections. So WWE and everybody else has been reporting that Sabu was 60 years old at the time of his death. Wikipedia had his year of birth listed as 1964, which is probably where WWE and AEW and the New York Times and all of these different outlets got their information. Because the New York Times had a story also on Sabu's death, and they listed the same thing. But according to RVD, Sabu was actually born on December 12th, 1963. So he was 61 years old at the time of his death. And his Wikipedia also says that he was born in Staten Island, New York. RVD says he has no idea where that came from. He was born in Michigan. And he also said that his real name was not Terrence, but just Terry. You know, and a lot of places listed his name as Terry Brunk, but WWE, for example, in their graphic that they put up, they listed his full name as Terrence. And they just assumed his name must be Terrence. People call him Terry. His name was not Terrence, even though Wikipedia listed it that way. He also claims that the reason, or part of the reason anyway, that his cause of death has not yet been announced or even investigated, has to do with Sabu's ex-wife, who he married in the late 90s. They divorced around 2010, and she was from Japan, which is where she's been back living ever since. Evidently, their divorce was never finalized, and they were still legally married. So because of that, they need her signature on certain documents, but she really doesn't want to have anything to do with any of this. And so as he tells it, the investigation can't go any further without her cooperation. Now, if there was a reason to believe that he died of anything but natural causes, if there was any foul play suspected, I imagine they wouldn't need anybody's permission to investigate. So it sounds to me like a case where the family just wants to be sure. Maybe they want an autopsy. I don't know. But as his spouse still, technically, they would need her permission. And so far, she's not giving it. So that's where things stand on that. But there was also a lot of controversy coming out of a Yahoo Sports piece that was published on Monday by Phil Schneider about Sabu's retirement match with Joey Janela at the GCW Spring Break show over WrestleMania weekend. And the match almost didn't happen because Sabu was in a bad way. And he ended up working the match. He took some brutal bumps. And that may have been the way that Sabu wanted it. But when he drops dead 3 weeks later, and you've got Joey Janela saying some of the things that he said in this story, you can understand how it would be a bad look for GCW. So I'm going to read a few excerpts from it. It should be noted that Janela gave this interview right after the match. It just didn't come out until this week, right after Sabu died. So the timing of it didn't do any favors to Janela or GCW. They just look really bad in this. But this is from the piece. Sabu was 60 years old this past WrestleMania season, and not an easy 60. Years of wild bumps and wild nights had taken the expected toll on his body. So when GCW announced that Sabu would be main eventing Joey Janela's Spring Break in a no-ropes barbed wire match in Las Vegas, the day before WrestleMania 41, there was a natural skepticism among wrestling fans. Sabu had become famous for no-showing bookings, including his own induction into the Independent Wrestling Hall of Fame a couple of years ago, and had not wrestled in several years. Of course, no showing was in the back of my mind, GCW promoter Brett Lauderdale told us shortly after the event, but I felt like Sabu was genuine. And one thing about Sabu I've come to learn over the years is behind all of the drama and silliness, Sabu has a lot of pride. And not only did he want to do it, but he wanted to give his best effort. I talked to Sabu a couple of days before the match, and he was telling me my knee hurts, and this and that. And I said, listen, Sabu, everybody knows you're hurting. You're 20-something years older than the last time you did this. People's expectations are realistic. No one is expecting this to be born to be wired. And he said to me, good, because it is going to be better than that. Predictably, the night of the April 18 show was chaotic. Nothing was going to be easy with Sabu. I was fairly confident that he was fine, Sabu's opponent, Joey Janela, told us several days after the event. I was kept in contact with him, and he has a team of people around him, guys this time. They were all saying he was ready to go, that he was going to the gym, that he was on the training program. I believed them until the day of the show. Then 2 hours before, I get a call. Sabu can't walk. What do you mean Sabu can't walk? They said, yeah, Sabu, something with his knee. They're locked up. He can't walk. And his feet are bleeding. He's not coming. Sabu's not coming. I said, Sabu's fucked. So we talked to independent wrestler Matt Tremont, and Tremont is about to be the replacement for the match. And I feel like this is going to be the most embarrassing moment of my wrestling career. There's 2,000 people here. This is one of the biggest spring breaks ever. The biggest crowd mania weekend indie-wise. And I'm going to have to go out there and announce that Sabu once again no-showed, and no-showed his own retirement match. Lauderdale was less concerned. In the back of my mind, I knew Sabu was coming. I never once worried. If we didn't hear from Sabu, then I would be worried. But the fact that he was communicating, I knew he was coming. We are an hour into the show, and I said, just get Sabu here, Janela continued. So they gave him something called Kratom. You can buy it at a smoke shop or something. It's like a legal opiate or something. They said he's hopping on the bed, he's hopping off the bed, and we're going to get him to the show. So he shows up 2 hours into the show. Sabu was on a different fucking planet. Everybody in the backstage area was like, what the fuck? Is this match going to happen? And my God, did it happen. Moments into the match, Sabu went for a signature Air Sabu dive off a chair, missed Janela, and went chest first into the barbed wire strands with his head landing and sticking in a giant crate of barbed wire. It was an immediate sign to the audience that this was not going to be a nostalgia match, that Sabu was going to go out on his own terms. Then minutes later, Sabu got whipped into a barbed wire board, which was resting on the barbed wire ropes, and flipped backward out of the ring, landing in a heap. He was definitely out cold. He was done, Janela said. They were telling me that there was no way. The reps were communicating to me that there's no way he's continuing this match. Like, holy shit. That is the one time you want the barbed wire to stop you. He just blew right through it. And then the Sandman came out, and that was all Sabu needed. Then the resurrection happened. Jesus resurrected 2 days later, the anniversary. Couldn't fucking believe it, dude. He was ready to go again. I guess that concussion knocked him back into 1996 or something. I don't know. So he's acknowledging there that Sabu was concussed, or they all thought he was concussed. Sabu came back, and they ran through several more sequences, including Janela taking some big bumps of his own, until he was finally pinned by Sabu. It is very rare in pro wrestling or in life to get the end that you deserve. Most careers don't end with Kobe scoring 60 points, or Sting selling out the Greensboro Coliseum. Most times the end is sad. Patrick Ewing averaging 6 points a game in an Orlando Magic jersey, or Ric Flair nearly dying on the ring apron. Sabu's last match before this was in 2021 against someone named Mr. California in Stanton, California, for a promotion called Extreme World Wrestling in a garage in front of maybe 100 people. That is normally how a legend goes out, with a whimper. But instead, for one last night, the most insane, iconic wrestler of his generation was Sabu again, with all that that entails. The chaos, the danger, and the disregard for humanity. Everything that happened in that match happened for a reason, Janela said. I'm just happy GCW gave him the platform in front of a sold-out house to have that moment and be Sabu for one last time. He's one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, one of the greatest innovators of all time. I'm just glad we were able to get it off. Regardless of the circumstances and the conditions that day, he just made it happen. And I know he was happy, and I'm happy, the fans were happy, his friends were happy, and I'm just glad we gave him this one last chance to shine in the spotlight. Now, per Fightful Select, Lauderdale confronted Janela about the interview, which has since drawn heavy backlash from fans. We're told that GCW was frustrated, embarrassed, and humiliated by the interview itself. Brett Lauderdale did speak to Joey Janela about the interview and the situation, but we are not sure what came of it. Now, RVD on his stream the other night defended GCW from all the criticism they've been getting online since the article was published, because there were a lot of people on social media saying like Janela and or Brett Lauderdale should be charged with manslaughter for Sabu's death, which is a ridiculous thing to say. I mean, the man was out the very next day doing signings, and he had done other shows. He did a podcast in the week since the match before he passed away. And in addition to that, until we even know what killed him, to place blame for his death is premature to say the least. But people were very upset, and they were popping off with all kinds of rantings and ravings. Now, on the Kratom stuff, and I don't know much about it, so I'm going to leave it to RVD, who uses it a lot. This is what he said. A lot of my friends have been able to quit taking opiates and take Kratom. A lot of followers have told me and thanked me for talking about Kratom because they've done the same thing. Can you get addicted to Kratom? You can get addicted to fucking chocolate. If you're a person that's going to be addicted to stuff, then stay away from everything. The answer to that is sure, it's possible. Can you take too much? Sure. I would say the fact that Sabu's own team was telling Janela that, all of a sudden he's hopping off the bed, he's hopping on the bed. And Janela in that interview said that, when Sabu showed up, he was on another fucking planet. Maybe he took a little too much of it. I don't know. He also said that after the match, Sabu told him that he still felt like he had one more match left in him. And he actually pitched the idea of wrestling RVD in a no ropes barbed wire match, another one. So I'll say this. The idea that this was his retirement match, which is how Janela and GCW promoted it, that was clearly never the case. According to Sabu himself, he was on a comedy podcast right before his death. He appeared on the Legion of Skanks podcast. And when the host brought up his quote-unquote final match, Sabu corrected him and said, no, it wasn't my final match. It was my last match, as in the last match that he had. But it was not his final match. And Francine backed that up on her podcast. She did a tribute to Sabu as well. And she said she spoke to him recently, and he told her, they said, I'm retiring. I never said I'm retiring. I'm not retiring. I don't know if they're just trying to sell tickets or what, but I'm not retiring. I'm going to keep wrestling. That's what he told her. And I'm sure they knew that, but they had a show to promote and they had tickets to sell. And so they promoted it as Sabu's retirement match. But for a very select few in the wrestling business, wrestling retirements are not real. And it's sad but true, Sabu bears most of the responsibility for the condition that he was in. You can't wrestle the style that he did for all those years and abuse your body like that in and out of the ring and not come out worse off for it on the other end. It's just not possible. The state that Sabu was in, and on the day of that GCW match, he was in a state where he did not belong in a wrestling ring, let alone a no ropes barbed wire match. He had no business being in the ring. I get what Janela is saying about Sabu wanting to go out like the old Sabu and, giving him the chance to work in front of a packed house instead of some random show in a garage somewhere. But there are just some times where, someone needs to step in and say this person is their own worst enemy. And we're not going to be a party to this. We care about the guy too much to do that to him. But that's not the pro wrestling mentality. The mentality is, especially the old school mentality, is you leave it all out there in the ring no matter what. Even if that means you die in the ring, then so be it. Sabu himself has said that if he ever died in the ring, how great would that be? Now, I forget which interview it was, but he cited Misawa and how he died in the ring. Like a warrior going out on their sword. What a better way to go out than that? He's not the only one to say that. Ric Flair has flat out said that he would have liked to have died in the ring. I understand wanting to go out doing what you love. You know, like an old guy dying in the middle of sex with a hot woman. What a way to go. She probably wouldn't like it very much. But what a way to go. In this case, I'm sure the fans in the crowd would not have liked to, have seen Sabu die in the middle of the ring. They wouldn't like to see these people die right in front of them. But this is how, some of these wrestlers think. Some of them have nothing else in their lives. All they've ever done and all they have is wrestling. And they just can't give it up. But there was one fan on social media who wrote, so GCW/Brett drugged Sabu, knowing he was unable to wrestle that night, or at least having issues, in the name of making 2,000 fans happy, rather than prioritizing a fucking old retired legend's health. I am so fucking disappointed to ever support GCW and buy tickets to their shows. Joey Janela responded to this. He said, we didn't give him kratom, his team did. It's also not illegal, and 85% of professional wrestlers do it, especially the ones on TV. So fuck you. Sabu was a grown man. He did what he had to do to get out there. I took care of him to the best of my ability. I didn't think what happened halfway through would happen. It was all to get him one great payday and one last shine in the spotlight. That night wasn't about me. It was about Sabu, and I wouldn't change a thing. And Janela later posted, I'm truly devastated over this, and this whole deal has really affected me. Kratom is something Sabu took daily for years. It helped him get off other substances. Sabu loved his weed and kratom, and his body was wrecked doing what he loved for 40 years. I did an interview for that article 2 days after the match, not knowing what would transpire weeks later. And I said that he was, quote, knocked out after that spot, when despite being a rough deal, he was not that. I was just trying to add to the lore and unpredictability of Sabu. I love Sabu. He was legitimately my idol growing up, and my friend and I just wanted to give him and the fans one last great Sabu spectacle. I think Janela is just covering his ass with that quote. I think what he told Yahoo was the truth, but he realized how bad it sounded in retrospect. So he was trying to cover that part up as best he could by saying, well, he wasn't really knocked out. I was just trying to add to the lore. Sabu himself, on that podcast that I mentioned earlier, he admitted that he got knocked out. Unless he's calling Sabu a liar. Sabu said there was a ton of other shit that he wanted to do in the match, but he got knocked out halfway through. So they threw a bunch of things in, and it wasn't his match anymore. He said, I woke up in a pool of blood. My eyes were open, but I don't remember any of that. My body was vibrating. My manager came over to me. He just said, you got knocked out. Yeah, I thought I did. Brett Lauderdale released a statement defending his usage of Sabu, saying he would never put someone in the ring who he thought would be a danger to themselves or to others. Any suggestion that I or Joey Janela forced him to do this match, supplied him with substances, or somehow caused his death is irresponsible, disingenuous, hurtful, and false. It's upsetting and discouraging to see people so eager to cast judgment without knowledge of the facts. I would never knowingly put someone who I believe was a danger to themselves or others in the ring, and my track record shows this to be true. I have pulled people in a public and painful manner from big matches before, sometimes literally moments before a match was to begin, and would do it again if I had to. I spoke to Sabu moments before the match, and he was Sabu. He was the same Sabu I had encountered in years past when I participated in his matches as a referee and later as a promoter. He was the same Sabu I met with the following day at WrestleCon, and the same Sabu that made multiple appearances on podcasts and at conventions in the weeks that followed. We still don't know what killed Sabu. RVD said that he had been complaining of some sort of stomach issue recently, but didn't want to go to the doctor to get it checked out. Maybe he was afraid about what the doctors would find. Did that have anything to do with his death? Did his heart just give out? We don't know. So it's fucked up to be blaming his death on GCW or on Joey Janela or anybody else right now. And I don't doubt that Janela loves Sabu and wanted to give him that one last great moment. Even if he knew it really wasn't going to be his final match, most likely. But whether Sabu died or not, the quotes that he gave to Phil Schneider were just incredibly stupid. So when Fightful reports that, GCW was embarrassed by the comments he made in that interview, They should be. About Sabu being in no condition to perform. He's in pain. His feet are bleeding, all this stuff. And he tells Sabu's team, just get him here. Just get Sabu here. That just makes it sound like it was more about the 2,000 people that paid to be there and making sure that he didn't no-show the event. As opposed to, holy shit, that sounds really bad. You should probably take him to the hospital to get him checked out. We'll come up with a plan B. Keep me posted on how he's doing and what the doctors say. But you don't get that at all from the article. It all sounds very predatory. And that's fucked up. And I know it's wrestling and this sort of thing isn't really all that surprising. But imagine the reaction that any non-wrestling fan would have to reading. And there were a lot of non-wrestling fans who read that piece, because it was on Yahoo Sports. And you even would look at some of the comments. And the answer shouldn't be, well, you're not in the business or you're not a wrestling fan, so I don't expect you to understand how the business works. Maybe, just maybe, the better response should be, you know what? You're right. That's super fucked up. And maybe the problem lies with the business and that whole mentality to begin with. But none of these people will ever admit that. Joey Janela did not kill Sabu. He didn't give him drugs. But everybody in this situation comes up looking sleazy as shit. And I don't care how badly Sabu may have wanted to go out there and work, he should not have been out there. It was sad. It was sad watching him fall out of the ring on his fucking head and get knocked out. And yet the match continued. Because that's how it is in the wrestling business, right? The show must go on. On a lighter note, if you want to check out the only match between Sabu and Jushin Thunder Liger, New Japan posted it from their G1 Climax special in 1995. It's up on NJPW World for free through Wednesday only. And I watched it last night. It's a pretty good match, so go check it out.